Hi, everyone, and welcome to Cultivating Business. I'm Kevin McLaughlin, partner with Centri Consulting, where I lead our cannabis practice. We have another fantastic guest today. Joining us is Darren Gleeman, managing partner of MBO Ventures. Darren, always great chatting with you, and really appreciate you joining us today.
Kevin, thanks for having me here. And I always want to talk. So that's what I do.
Love that. First off, before we even get into some of the cannabis stuff, why don't you just tell some of our guests a little bit about your background, even before you got into cannabis.
Okay, so we've been doing ESOPs now for 25 years. That's all we do. We've structured well over 400 ESOPs in the past 25 years, well over $22 billion in enterprise value, and we've structured over $7 billion in ESOP debt. We know the space super well. About 2.5 years ago, someone came to me and said, "Oh, can you do an ESOP in the cannabis space?"
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, I mean, you could, but at that time, you were talking about valuations, maybe 3 years ago, valuations of 4, 5 times revenue, which is just
Mm-hmm.
insane. So I'm like, no, it doesn't make sense. You would want to do a venture capital route to fund your ESOP or to get out. Doesn't really make sense to do an ESOP. And then they said, oh, and there's this weird tax regime called 280E, and as soon as they told me that, I knew that there was a humongous advantage for the ESOP structure.
You've kind of revolutionized the industry. Like I think we met like 2 years ago around this time. How did you what was the first step in really getting like clarity on that? Like, because there's certainly like a legal aspect of it. Like, what was the once you found out about this whole 280, what then did that just kind of take you down a uh, a legal path? How did it evolve from that to like, okay, I think we got some, I think there's an opportunity here to help folks.
Immediately. Immediately. And the reason why is 280E just says, right, you cannot take these deductions.
Hmm.
So I understood that right away. And what I did actually, someone told me this, and I said, can you explain to me how it works? Like, yeah, a cannabis firm is not allowed to deduct salaries or rent. And when they told that to me, I was like, all right, let me look into this. So I actually looked into that part of the code. And I did speak to attorneys in the industry about specifically 280E. And then once I learned what it was, which is you can't take deductions, I realized very quickly that the ESOP structure does work. Now, of course, I did speak with a bunch of other people, my partners, and like, this is what's going on here. And everyone who does the ESOP structure immediately knew that, yes, this works right away because with an ESOP, you're not evading 280E. You're not getting around 280E at all, at all. It's just that when you have a company that pays zero federal tax and zero state tax, it just doesn't matter that you are not allowed to take deductions. And you don't. When you actually fill out your tax returns for, the latest company just became an ESOP. I did just came out of the closet, so to speak, a couple of days ago, was Canada Provisions in
Yep, saw that.
Massachusetts. I didn't realize that they came out. That's one of my clients. And, when they fill out their tax returns, they don't take any deductions because they're not allowed. But it doesn't make a difference because they don't pay any taxes.
Yeah, unbelievable. How is there like a sweet spot of a size company, or it's really, all different shapes and sizes that like an ESOP makes sense for some of these um
Yeah,
cannabis companies?
I would say for cannabis, or really for most companies, it's an expensive proposition, right? It's a
Mhm.
pain in the neck. You want to have a certain size. So the size, I would say the minimum EBITDA is for people that don't, is a fancy investment banking term for net income. That's where your net income before taxes, right? We call it EBITDA. So about $2.5 million in EBITDA, which is pretty high,
Mhm.
and about 20 employees. And that is the floor to do the ESOP.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that I think that there's plenty of those out there in that I think in that sweet spot.
Yeah, and there's a lot of companies that are smaller that wants to do it, that want to do it. And for the company itself, yeah, it makes sense. It totally makes sense for the company because you're running completely tax-free. You have these employees that are also the owners, but for the actual owner, imagine, like, think about it, Kevin. Let's say you and I decided, let's start a cannabis company today. And in a year, let's say we're doing well, but we're making $100,000 in profit. And we think we're going to be making millions in the next couple of years. Well, we're literally, what an ESOP is, it's a sale of your company. So you're selling your company to the employees via the structure. So if we're only making $100,000 a year, if we're only making $100,000 a year, well, then we're going to sell that company, let's say multiple of 5 for $500,000. Well, we're giving up a lot of money because if we think we're down the road making a lot more money, we shouldn't be selling at that level.
Right. So there's a little bit of, analysis that goes into that and what makes sense timing wise and things like that.
Exactly.
Okay, so there's been a lot of chatter about rescheduling this year. That obviously impacts 280. How do you see that, I'll say, playing out? No one really knows what the heck's happening.
Right.
And still opportunities presumably for folks within this space for ESOPs, I would think.
Yeah, well, two things with that. But to the rescheduling, I know a lot about rescheduling. And let's just say it does get rescheduled tomorrow, for the sake of example. Just say it gets rescheduled tomorrow,
Right.
which is not. But let's say it gets rescheduled tomorrow. Okay, so now your effective tax rate, which was before, right now, today, your effective tax rate for a lot of these cannabis companies are, let's say, 60%.
Yeah.
Well, after rescheduling, your effective tax rate now is going to go to 45%. So you're still paying a ton of taxes. So let's say you have EBITDA, the fancy word, let's say you have EBITDA of $10 million. Right now, you're paying about $6 million in taxes. After rescheduling, you're making $10 million, you'll be about $4.5 million in taxes. Both scenarios, the ESOP is still tremendous in terms of the tax savings, but there's also so much more that goes on with an ESOP besides just that one portion of not paying any tax. I digress, but back to the rescheduling conversation. I didn't make a bet. Yesterday, I'm talking to someone, a potential client, and he was like, oh, rescheduling is going to happen in probably within 3 weeks. And I'm like, there's no way it's going to happen. It can't happen in 3 weeks. He said, no, it is. I'm like, look. And he's like, I'll bet you. And my background before this is in hedge funds, which I ran a hedge fund, and I bet for a living. And so when you bet for a living, you try not to be wrong that often. So I'm like, well, no, this is an easy bet. And I went through and I explained how rescheduling works. Even if tomorrow the DEA says, you know what, we decided we're going to go ahead and reschedule to Schedule 3. Well, then what they have to do is they have to have a 60-day comment period that they put in the Federal Register.
So now, that means that's minimum 2. You got 2 months then, right? Of
just that. Just that minimum. And then before they actually reschedule, they have to answer every single comment that was made. So we're expecting about 10,000 comments. That could take years. Now, if they really go fast, there's no way this is going to happen before the election. My belief is that even if they did it tomorrow, it's going to go past the election. And then if Biden wins, I believe it will be rescheduled to Schedule 3. If Trump wins, I believe it'll be stay Schedule 1 or 2.
Yeah, there's a lot unknown too with not to get into all that stuff, but it's the reality of it is there's some unknown with everything coming up with the election and how that impacts rescheduling.
Yeah, it's huge.
So it's a process, right? I think that's the key here. A lot of people have their hopes up. I'm optimistic, but to your point, anytime you're dealing with the government and this type of stuff, it's not like it just you snap your fingers and it's okay.
I'm very hopeful. I'm a big believer, and along with, I guess, everyone in the industry, it's ridiculous. I think that it should be a Schedule 1 drug. I think it should be Schedule 3, but there is a lot of senators, congressmen, former DEA heads that do not want to make this a Schedule III drug.
Yes, I mean, you even see some of these other folks who came out and, writing the letter. I mean, again, I don't know how much that weighs on it. Probably depends who's ultimately in power and things like that. But yeah, you're starting to see some of these folks come out and like against it, and it's like, okay, I thought we were past some of that, but I guess we're not.
That's right. You know what? We're a big country, 300 million people, and everyone has their own thoughts
Yeah,
on everything.
exactly. What about like from a market perspective? Again, I know you're in tune with everything that's happening. What markets do you see, specific? I guess are there markets specific to ESOPs that you see have more opportunities than others? And then just generally, what markets are you seeing, trending up? I think the big news recently coming out this week, it's going to be on the ballot in Florida for recreational use, which would be, I think, huge for that state. But wanted to get your thoughts on how that like markets are trending and how that plays into your expertise.
Yeah, I think with us, the biggest issue with ESOPs are just educating business owners on what it is. And I know I can't go directly, usually I can't go directly into a business owner because they won't believe it.
Yeah.
Like literally they won't believe it. So I have to wait to be introduced via an accounting firm or a law firm. I know there are certain states, like once I was introduced in Washington State, I got some introductions and it just blew up. And I have about 10 companies that are ready to do an ESOP today. And they're very employee centric there. That's really what's moving them. But in the state of Washington, it's the one state you really can't do an ESOP because an ESOP, you're not really owned by the individuals, you're owned by a trust. It's called an employee stock ownership trust. That's the tax exempt trust. Well, in the cannabis rules in the state of Washington, a trust cannot be an owner of a cannabis company. And so it wasn't meant against employee ownership. They just didn't know.
Right.
So getting that piece removed now has to take legislative action. You have to have the House and the Senate inside Washington actually create a bill, or actually what they're looking at doing is putting it inside of another bill and just having the removal. But that's not an easy piece. You have the newer states like New York. People have been speaking to people there, but I think they're a little bit too new. And New York right now is in crazy flux. I mean, I live in New York City, and you have thousands of these illegal cannabis shops that are not paying 280E, they're not paying excise tax, and they're getting
like good, they're getting product, like they're getting like branded product for the most part, I think, from what
they do. That's right. They branded product and people don't care and people have no idea about the difference. I mean, I know because I'm in the industry, so I can walk down the street and I know who's illegal, and there are very few legal opportunities in New York City right now. So I don't think New York is really ripe.
Yeah, they got to get squared away on some of that stuff before there's probably, the opportunity that a lot of folks thought there would be, just, given the market size.
Yeah. Then you have California, which is fairly saturated right now. I haven't really gotten much marketing there, but I think there's probably tons of companies that would love to do this. They just don't know that it exists. I'm speaking with someone in Oregon and in New Mexico right now. They have a little chain. Massachusetts has been big because that's where we first started. Maine is also big. I'm getting some nibbles from Florida. So yeah, I think the market is definitely ripe for this, and people want to do it once you start explaining to them how it works.
Yeah, learning a little bit about it, learning more about it, right?
It's just a learning curve. I can explain it to people again and again, and I think I can dilute it down how the whole thing works. And then, like I said, there's a lot more than just that not paying any taxes. But again, you just have to keep on explaining it. For instance, when you sell your company, right, to the ESOP, you're really just selling your company. But you as the owner are going to get these thing called warrants. A warrant it's like a stock option, which allows you to buy back a piece of the company in the future, which is a great second bite of the apple for the owner. So the owner gets to sell today, gets money today. Oh, and by the way, for the owner, there's another thing with the owner with an ESOP that if you sell to the ESOP, that owner, when they sell the company, they can defer their capital gains taxes. That's a big deal.
Yeah, that is a big deal. A lot of like It's a different tax incentive, but a huge one, right? When you're thinking about, you know, selling a business, you know?
Yeah, that's right. And here's one that's really very interesting. Doesn't work for cannabis because there's no tax deductions. But let's say any company, let's say a manufacturing company wants to sell their business. They want to sell, let's say, 30% or 40% of the company. And let's say, make it easy. Let's say it's a $100 million business
Mhm.
and they want to sell 30% for $30 million. Okay, 30% for $30 million,
Yeah,
$100 million business. Well, let's say JP Morgan funds it, they get $30 million. The company, right? They just sold it to the ESOP, to the employees. The company can now take a $30 million deduction because it's funded not by the employees. The employees don't have $30 million to give.
right.
So how do you get funded for a sale of a $30 million company? It's just like private equity. You take a loan out on the company themselves. So the company takes the loan out for $30 million, pays it to the owner, and then the company can deduct that $30 million. It's huge.
Big.
And it is big. So there's all these random tax subsidies that the government gives for this because they really want the employees to become owners. It's a big deal. They really want this. This is something where, interestingly, you have on one side Bernie Sanders. We all know Bernie Sanders. He's on the politically left side of the spectrum. He loves ESOPs, big ESOP supporter
Really?
because of, yeah,
I guess he puts it in
huge,
the hands of the employees in theory, and there's some tax
because the
benefits.
employees. He doesn't care
Yeah,
about the tax benefits. He cares about what it's for the employees, because now the employees get a piece of the pie and they get
right.
a huge chunk of the pie and it costs them nothing. So he's a big ESOP supporter. On the right, you know who also loves ESOPs? Mitch McConnell. And
Interesting.
he's super, super right. Why does he love it? Because of the tax breaks
Tax.
that the
There you go.
companies get, right? So that's why they both come in together. And they really both together love the ESOP structure. Different reasons, but they both love the ESOP structure.
It's an interesting, you know, I think it's getting out there more and more, but to your point, it's not just cannabis. There's other industries and businesses certainly that have been doing it for some time now, reaping the benefits.
Oh yeah, we've done in every industry. We've done it. What it doesn't work for, people always want to know, oh, what are the negatives of an ESOP, right? Everyone wants to know what the negatives are, right? Well, if your company is growing leaps and bounds, if you're growing, year over year, 100, 200%, hold off.
Yeah.
You don't want, because for the owners, you're going to give up too much money. If you're growing like this type of curve, you want to use something called venture capital, where
Hmm.
someone's going to come in and invest in your
Infuse
company and
you a
give.
little bit, right? Yeah.
That's right. That's what you want to use. So artificial intelligence companies, robotics, not good for an ESOP. You just can't get the money that you'd be able to do it with venture capital.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So again, I won't hold you to this. I always kind of end with a prediction. I know we talked about the rescheduling, which is everyone's favorite topic, but any predictions you have for cannabis as we look at 2024? As we just close out the first quarter here, any predictions you have? Again, not holding you to this, but always like to get someone's thoughts on where we're going here.
Yeah. So my prediction is, more of the same. The banking, what's it called now? The
The
Banking Act.
safer bank, whatever, yeah, safer
Safer,
banking.
yeah. That's not going to pass. 280E is not going to be rescheduled this year. I do believe, like I said, it's going to be after the election, so we're talking about next year. And I think we have probably a long runway, probably another, it's so funny because everyone's like, well, when do you think federal legalization is going to occur? And
It
everyone
could
is
never
always like,
happen. It could never happen.
it,
Like
it
at
could
this point.
it could possibly never happen. I'm always like, you know what, 4 or 5 years down the road, but I've been saying that since I started in this industry 3 years ago. So I'm still thinking, 5 years down the road. But then again, federal legalization, you never know. I mean, it could just pop in. Who
Yeah,
knows?
it
But
could be something that happens, in a year or two, somehow miraculously, or it could be a little bit longer, like a lot longer. Who knows? There's a lot of variables.
I'm predicting, here's a prediction. I'm going to predict a lot of roll-ups to occur within the next 18 months. There's a lot of companies out there, they're making some money, but they're having difficulty. They have difficulty raising money, and they're
Right.
having difficulty with their economies of scale, which they have none. So, their cannabis is getting more expensive. Their operating expenses are more expensive. They
Mhm.
need to pretty much join with other companies. So I think there's gonna be a lot of those, a lot more of
Yeah,
those.
hope so. I think a lot of folks have been waiting on that. It's just been a kind of weather in the storm the last, couple years.
There's no cash.
You
There's
can only
no,
do, and you can only do that for so long, and I think it's inevitable. So I agree, and hopeful that does start to take place here.
yeah, I
Uh,
hope so. I hope
yeah,
so.
we'll see though. Well, Darren, thanks for joining us. Always love chatting. Look forward to learning more about this, and I think it's great for folks listening and watching this that will have an opportunity to just hear about some of the different opportunities that ESOPs provide to folks in cannabis.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to see you in person in Benzinga.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we have another great episode planned for next month, so stay tuned and please join us on the next episode of Cultivating Business.